Hello everyone, welcome to the second installment of Nintendo Everything's apparently annual countdown of the top 10 game soundtracks of the year. I'm your host, Patrick, and we've already started off with a number 10 entry on the list, which was Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. I think it's a fitting way to start the podcast, since it reuses and remixes a lot of music from the game which took the top spot last year, which was Super Mario 3D World. So if last year's winner ended up making 10th place, then 2014 must have been an amazing year for music on Nintendo consoles. And it kind of was. For the most part, the soundtracks the readers voted for as the best of the best are fantastic, even if I don't have a whole lot to say about them, like Captain Toad, which I didn't play. It's just a nice little soundtrack with some simple, catchy tunes. I actually found Captain Toad's theme to be really grating when I played Super Mario 3D World, but the many arrangements of it in this game are much, much better, and there's probably some version of it starting off the podcast. Let's move right along to the ninth spot on the list, which was the soundtrack to Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, another game which I didn't get to play and so don't have a whole lot to discuss. Wow, this podcast is getting off to a great start. Anyway, both the Professor Layton and Ace Attorney series are known for having excellent music, so I can see why it made the list. Both halves of the game are scored by different composers. Tomohito Nishiura, who has worked on all of the Layton games, composed the music for the Professor's portion, while the Phoenix Wright music was all done by Capcom's Yasumasu Kitagawa, who hadn't actually worked on the Ace Attorney series. He did the excellent soundtrack to X-Troopers, the weird anime version of Lost Planet that'll never be localized, but Layton vs. Phoenix Wright has a totally different style. Despite borrowing from the structure of both games, where the Layton tunes are better suited for exploring and solving puzzles, while the Ace Attorney side has all the usual courtroom pieces and character themes, the game's soundtrack has a cohesive sound to it. It all has a very orchestral feel to it, which I think suits the more fantastical setting of the game. It's definitely a bit more Layton than Phoenix Wright though, as you can hear in the game's cross-examination music that I included, which borrows the Professor's usual accordion and strings section. I've also thrown in the tracks Labyrinth City, which has that usual Layton air of mystery to it, and Casting Magic, the newest version of one of the Ace Attorney series' pursuit themes, which tend to play when you finally crack the case. Bringing in this next segment is the night music from Fantasy Life's Grassy Plains area. Fantasy Life didn't place too well overall, despite featuring music composer Nobuo Uematsu, who's probably best known for his work on Blue Dragon, Rad Racer, and the score to the 1980s hentai PC game Alpha. But this particular track was requested by a voter. He said that the track that stood out to me the most was the night theme from Fantasy Life. When I was out in the East Grassy Plains, it just sounded so mysterious and mystic. So there you go, that's Fantasy Life. Taking out the 8th spot on the list is Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. These games didn't place quite as well as last year's X and Y versions, but 8th place isn't too bad for a soundtrack consisting largely of older songs. I didn't realise until playing the remakes how much I actually liked Ruby and Sapphire's soundtrack. I always passed it off because of all the tinny trumpets and just generally low quality of the Game Boy Advance's sound hardware, but I think it's actually one of the strongest soundtracks in the series. There's heaps of great, well-composed route themes, town music, and trainer eye-catch tunes packed in there. And of course, the battle music is as great as ever, making use of the improved sound quality to add a bit of extra punch to songs. Of these battle songs, I decided to include the music heard when facing off against Brendan or May, the professor's assistant who sort of serves as a rival. But while you do encounter them several times, they're not really your rival. The actual rival shows up much later, and I won't spoil what their battle music ends up being because it came as quite a welcome surprise. It's probably also worth pointing out that the music that plays when you run into either Brendan or May changes depending on the character, which is a nice touch. As one reader wrote in, both were equally good and exemplify the fun-loving personality of the rival in this game that the series hasn't replicated again. Most notably, however, is the version of their theme that plays at the end of the game. It made the ending sequence much more meaningful and helped me to appreciate the closeness of the friendship between Brendan and May. I don't know a song so heavily tied to a relationship like theirs. Well anyway, Pokemon's rival themes tend to be split between more light-hearted tunes like the ones heard when fighting your friends in X and Y, or others like Black and White 2s which are better suited to an aggressive encounter with a guy who's just really angry about his dead cat. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphires mediates the two styles, creating one of my favourite battle songs in the game. My absolute favourite piece of battle music in the game is actually a completely new composition. I decided to throw in the music heard when fighting Zinnia, who's an odd character who shows up in the game's post-game Delta episode, as it features some interesting instrumentation that's quite unlike anything else on the soundtrack. I think the battle themes are the best part of this entry, but I've tried to break them up with some other tracks. The music heard in Slateport City is one of the highlights for me. Its triumphant bells mark the point in the game where the world really opens up, and you can go exploring and mess around with secret bases, contests, and all that good stuff. This triumphant trend carries over to another new track, Soaring Dreams, which plays when you take off and explore the skies. It's just perfect JRPG airship music, which makes sense since that's exactly what purpose these new segments of the game serve. Next up is the 7th placing entry on the list, Kirby Triple Deluxe, which I've never played but I somehow do own the soundtrack. It's totally Kirby music with Kirby veterans Hirokazu Ando and Jun Ishikawa delivering yet another set of cheerful platforming pieces. I've tried to focus on brand new tracks with my selections, although there are a lot of interesting arrangements of old Kirby songs in the soundtrack. Though I won't be playing them, the rearranged Masked Day 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 music from Kirby Superstar Ultra is a standout, as are the charming acoustic guitar and recorder versions of Kirby's Dreamland music used in the Day Day Day's Drum Dash minigames. Of the new tracks, I included Sky at Sunset and Moonlight Capital, which are both level themes that stick pretty close to the usual Kirby style. More interesting, I think, is the music from the game's final boss fight, which goes through a number of different phases. So I've thrown in some of those songs, starting with Sullied Grace, which is pretty much just Dancing Mad from Final Fantasy VI. It has shredding guitars, it has creepy laughter, which I guess was just added onto the official soundtrack release. It's not really the kind of music you'd expect from a Kirby game, but that's all the more reason to include it. From there, we'll transition to Moonstruck Blossom, which plays during a later phase in the fight. This piece, with its delicate piano and what sounds like an ocarina, make for an ending that's both triumphant and a little bit sad. Though the fight itself isn't quite as crazy as fighting a giant eyeball that's crying blood, this music provides an excellent conclusion to a game that's amazing to say the least. According to a commenter, I actually have no idea what it's like. Next on the list is a soundtrack that doesn't appeal to me, from a game where next to nothing about it appeals to me. It is of course the soundtrack to Hyrule Warriors, and I'm definitely not disparaging anyone who likes it at all, it's just not my thing. Hyrule Warriors takes the famously fantastic music from the Zelda series, and filters it through the style of the Dynasty Warriors soundtrack, transforming it into butt rock garbage, so okay, I guess. Composers Masato Koike and Yuki Matsumura from Koei definitely have an interesting way of adapting these classic tunes, and hopefully this comes across in my song picks. I've gone with the music from the game's scenario menu, which is a medley of songs from throughout the Zelda timeline, or at least the 3 games in the series that actually show up in Hyrule Warriors. After that we've got Hammer of Stones, which seems to have parts of the Death Mountain music from A Link to the Past in it, and then we have the game's rockin' arrangement of Ocarina of Time's boss battle music. man, what great Zelda music. Coming in at number 5 is Bayonetta 2, which was quite a polarizing soundtrack amongst you guys, with ratings all across the board. Personally, it's one of my favourite entries on the list, with a unique sound that blends together lounge music, J-pop, chaotic orchestral pieces, over-the-top Latin chanting, and more. Because it has an absolutely massive, diverse soundtrack, it was difficult to limit the playlist to just a handful of songs, though there are a few standout tracks. First up is the game's version of Moon River, the song made famous by Breakfast at Tiffany's, and now I guess this game about a leggy witch decapitating angels with chainsaws strapped to her feet. This cover of the song by Keely Bumpford seems to be really popular with voters, as several people listed it in their favourite track of the year. Following that is The Legend of Aesir, a track that sounds like it would fit nicely in a final boss battle, but no, it actually plays at the very opening of the game, because that's just how crazy Bayonetta 2 is. YouTube commenter Umbra Witch Jean adds, "Every time I listen to this song, I imagine myself growing to be 50 feet tall, laying waste to the shitty town and school I went to during my late elementary school years, and killing everyone who once bullied me. Then I imagine myself walking away from the town as it burns to ashes, and then I yell to the heavens, I am God!" Wow, that's actually pretty messed up, lady. Why'd I even read that? Moving on, the final track is just titled The Lumen Sage, and presumably plays during one of the many boss fights with the Sage. It's all good stuff, and there's no other soundtracks out there like it, except for the original game, which I guess was technically also released in 2014. Does that mean I'll be playing music from it during the break? Who can say? Take it away, Bumford. Bringing us in is the remix music from the first Bayonetta's Space Harrier stage, a level where I feel like I'm the only person in the world who actually liked it. Well, me and Hideki Kamiya. But then I just really like Space Harrier music, like to the point where I bought the Space Harrier 3DS theme just so I could have it playing whenever I boot up the console. Anyway, enough about Space Harrier. Let's move on to the number 4 entry on the countdown, which is Shovel Knight. The music to Yacht Club Games' critically acclaimed platformer, which I also haven't played yet, was handled primarily by Jake Kaufman. The music to Yacht Club Games' critically acclaimed platformer, which I also haven't played yet, was handled primarily by Jake Kaufman. He's proven in the past that he's more than capable of providing energetic compositions that are perfect for a fast-paced platformer, with his work on Shantae, Mighty Switch Force, and also DuckTales Remastered, which made last year's list. But Shovel Knight's soundtrack might be even better than all of those games, featuring a whole heap of catchy chiptune tracks that are true to the sound of old NES games, but far more musically complex than what I'm used to. How authentic is Shovel Knight's soundtrack? Just like when it comes to supposed 8-bit graphics, many composers half-ass it when it comes to recreating the sound of NES music, but not Shovel Knight. The soundtrack is actually available in an NSF format, meaning you can play it on an actual NES or Famicom hardware. Shovel Knight also features contributions from Mega Man composer Manami Matsumae, who I had written down a bunch of stuff about before realizing that I had her mixed up with ex-Konami composer Michiru Yamane for some reason, and we won't be hearing from her until a bit later on. Anyway, Matsumae's pieces are all great, and I've added one of them, Flowers of Antimony, to the playlist, along with Strike the Earth and High Above the Land. And then rounding out the music is the Requiem of Shield Knight, a melancholy piece that shows that there's more of an emotional side to Shovel Knight's soundtrack than initially appears. Alright, that was Darkest Night from another Jake Kaufman soundtrack from last year, WayForward's Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Shantae very narrowly missed out on making the top 10, but it's a fantastic soundtrack featuring a mix of new tracks and incredible arrangements of existing Shantae songs. Though of course I'm biased. Jake asked on Twitter if anyone had any favourite tracks from the series they wanted to be remixed, and I asked for the Watertown music from the first game, which ended up making it into Pirate's Curse as Sky's theme. It's probably worth noting that both Shovel Knight and Shantae's soundtracks are available on Bandcamp for the price of whatever you want to pay. Moving on, we're down to the top 3, and it's all first-party Nintendo stuff from here on. Taking the number 3 spot is the soundtrack to Mario Kart 8, which really took me by surprise. The Mario Kart series typically has pretty good music, but composers Kenta Nagata, Shiho Fuji, Atsuko Asahi, Ryo Nagamatsu and Yasuaki Iwata took the extra step of recording the tracks with actual instruments. Like last year's Super Mario 3D World score, this blend of live performances and more traditional video gamey sounds lends the game a unique character and tone. It also allows for the soundtrack to feature a variety of musical genres, from the smooth jazz of Dolphin Shoals to the mix of orchestral and electronic styles in Cloud Top Cruise. I've always liked how each Mario Kart song is timed so that it roughly matches up to where you are on the track, with each composition looping after each lap and speeding up for the final rush to the finish line. It's a little restrictive as it means that the pieces are usually only about a minute long, but Mario Kart 8 uses some interesting tricks to keep things from getting repetitive. The instrumentation will change based on where you're driving, like if you're going through an underwater section or flying through a thunderstorm. It's really neat. The live instruments and new arrangements also breathe new life into some of the older tracks, which fits with the fact that they've been completely remade in HD. Of the older tracks, I've included the new version of Moo Moo Meadows from Mario Kart Wii, and the song from That Road That You Go When You Die. As for the new songs, I've thrown in Water Park, Electrodome, and my personal favourite track, which is Mount Warrior. Mount Warrior is an interesting track because it's split into 3 sections, and each of these goes through a different musical movement, so the song has a natural sense of progression that ends in quite a triumphant finish as you drive down a ski slope towards the finish line. Enjoy. And that's the closest we'll ever get to a new F-Zero game. Coming in as the runner-up in the competition is Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was maybe my favourite game of 2014 overall, and its soundtrack expanded the dong of many a listener. I didn't really care for the Donkey Kong Country Returns soundtrack at all, but this Wii U follow-up brought back composer David Wise, who had previously contributed some of the best tracks to the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy. I got a heap of comments on this soundtrack. This one says, David Wise still has his amazing music composing touch in Tropical Freeze. Music like Alpine Incline, Seashore War, and the remix of Sticker Brush Symphony bring back nostalgia and joy to my ears. I hope the Donkey Kong series continues with great music like this. Others called the soundtrack absolutely outstanding, David Wise is a genius, and so on, but why is the soundtrack so good? I think that Wise's strengths lie in creating rich, atmospheric pieces that feel strangely appropriate for this game about a gorilla bouncing on Viking penguins. Each of the islands in Tropical Freeze has its own musical style, and very little of the music is reused across levels. For instance, the first island has a typically tropical feel, with bongos, ukuleles and steel drums, but when you shift to Windmill Hills on the second island, the style completely changes. One voter called Windmill Hills one of the best songs I've ever heard in a platformer, and it's certainly quite a departure from the first area with its laid-back rustic style and harmonica melody. The integration of distinct musical styles continues throughout the game, and it helps to give each area its own identity. There's also a few arrangements of music from the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy. The standout to me is the way that the first game's aquatic ambience track seamlessly works its way into the usual level music when exploring underwater. There's also an excellent level involving a tense showdown with a giant octopus that weaves together both aquatic ambience and Lockjaw's Locker from Donkey Kong Country 2 to create a variety of moods. I've tried to demonstrate the shift between all the different sections of the piece in the playlist, as well as including the tracks Windmill Hills, Busted Bayou, Scorch and Torch, and Seashore War. Hopefully it worked out. Come on, Cranky, take us to the fridge.
You can be here, you can be there, anywhere. You can go any place you wanna go, don't you know? You're just an image of yourself floating in the air. Can't lift a thing and you can't even comb your hair. A hologram is like a telegram. You can send it anywhere, but you never go nowhere.
Stop. Sorry, that was the wrong Donkey Kong music. Here's Windmill Hills. Alright, we've been through 9 entries and it's time for the big one. It's all been leading to this. Can I get an announcer in here?
This game's winner is...
It's Super Smash Bros., obviously. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U, which I lumped together because they both have pretty much the same music, earned the highest ratings of any game on the list, and it's not hard to see why. The games feature over 400 songs taken from throughout Nintendo's history, and they're arranged by some of the best composers in the business. While this massive tracklist is padded out with the original versions of songs and arrangements from previous Smash Bros. Games, there are plenty of new tracks which are just as good as the original compositions. Yeah, we didn't really need a billion remixes of the Donkey Kong Country jungle level music, especially when none of them are as good as the one in Tropical Freeze, but thankfully Smash Bros. Is at its best when it's highlighting some of the more overlooked Nintendo soundtracks. There's new arrangements of music from Style Savvy, Nintendogs, Fire Emblem Gaiden, Coldcept, even Yoshi's Woolly World, which isn't even out yet. Some of the songs might not be too suitable for a fighting game, but it's also a fighting game where Pac-Man can fight a yoga instructor in space by throwing banana peels, so anything goes really. I want to spend the rest of the show cramming in as much Smash Bros. Music as possible, but first we should go over all the incredibly talented composers who contributed to this fine soundtrack. There's Masato Koda, Kenji Ito, Yuzo Koshiro, Yasunori Mitsuda, Michiko Naruke, Keiichi Okabe, Kumi Tanioka, Chen Kenichi, Hiroyuki Sakai, Yoko Shinomura, Toru Minagishi, Mahito Yokota, Kenji Yamamoto.
I sing. Don't you understand that holograms can't push red buttons?